Okay, so drums to me, they're my favorite thing in the entire world to mix. I love mixing drums. Personally, I think I struggle with every other aspect of a mix except drums. I have to really work hard on everything but drums, and I think that's because drums are very hard. And so I spent most of the first probably 10 years of mixing trying to hone in making drums sound good. And so we do a lot of different things here to make our drums sound very punchy and very live, even on the online campus mix. And so that's what I'm going to show you guys today. Um, we are running every bit of processing for the drums except for the drum reverb um, through Pro Tools. So I'll show you the drum reverb in just a bit, but everything else is going to be on the Pro Tools screen. So here we go. Okay, this is the moment I've been waiting for. I am super pumped to show you what our drums sound like. So here's how we have it set up. We have a kick drum microphone. We also have a kick two mic in the house, but I'm not using it in the broadcast mix. We have a snare drum microphone, and then I've duplicated the same snare drum channel, and I'll show you how I process both of those. Then we have the rack tom, the floor tom, and two overheads. So I've got some pre-recorded drums here that I'd like to show you, and I'll just bring up the drums in a quick little mix, and then I'll show you how I process it. All right, here we go. Okay, pretty cool. So let's go over the individual channels. So we use Trigger, sue us. It's not a big deal. No, we went through a bunch of different experimentations with making our current drum set sound exactly like we wanted it to. And honestly, it sounds so much better to just sample. I did some sampling work with a company called I Want That Sound a few years ago. We sampled some trigger samples for them, and so I ended up being able to get their entire pack. This is probably my favorite kick drum from it. It's from the Near Z pack, Near Z and Jeff Giuliano pack, um, and it's the Rock God kick drum. And I just imported the preset as is. So this is the Rock God kick, followed by the SSL channel from Waves. So I've got the gates turned on, but it's not being used. Um, I am compressing, but just barely. And I'm adding some um, about 6 decibels of boost at 50 hertz. And then I'm literally cutting every possible bit of 500 out of it. So it's a negative 15 decibel cut at 500 on a very narrow cue. And then I'm taking 800, which is it's a little bit different. So I used to cut a lot at 800, but then I started boosting the kick at 800 and cutting the bass a little bit at 800, and it's made a big difference in the way they sit. I don't know what it is about it. For some reason, even though it's a little boxy sounding, soloed out, it really sits well in the mix. So I'm boosting about 6 dB at 8. Uh, um, so I'm of the mindset that you should use subtractive EQ, yes, but at the same time, EQ is meant to enhance as well. And so I'm not afraid to boost stuff by a ton. I know that's not a very popular way of at least starting out with EQ, but that's just I've gotten to a point where I said, you know what, I like the way this sounds, so I'm going to crank it up. So you'll notice that a lot of my boosts and cuts are very, very extreme, like this negative 15 decibel one right here. Um, I'm boosting by 4 decibels at 8K as well. If you don't have this SSL channel strip um, or any SSL EQ, you should look into getting one because 8K on the channel strip whether it's the Slate version or the UAD or the Waves version. Um, Man, 8K sounds great. It's like their sweet spot. I've also got this analog button turned on. Unlike the rest of the Waves plugins, analog on here doesn't produce a hiss. It just gives it a little bit of saturation. So that is the kick drum. Let me show you what it sounds like without the EQ. And then I'll turn it back on. Cool. And then on the X32, I have a high pass filter on the kick drum at 40 hertz. So I'm taking off that really, really low. So I've boosted at 50 on the SSL and cut at 40 on the actual console. For the snare drum, I have a mix of different, I want that sound sample. So I've got the low crusty clean. This is probably the main snare, and I've got it tuned down 5 to get that deep snare. Material is Madonna Material Girl. It's from the 1985 pack, and I've got that in simply for the reverb. Fat Favorite is from the Ben Phillips pack. It's a really good one. My buddy David Glenn Dave Culp from Dave Glenn Recording, he said that I think Bethel was using this snare, and so I imported it in, and I love it. So it's pretty close to low crusty up here. Beefo Brady Big, another great sounding snare. And these rooms from the Beefo Brady sound awesome. I've tuned those down 5 as well. So blended together, I'm using 5 total snare drums to make the sound that I want. And then I go back to the SSL channel strip. I really like this SSL from Waves on the drums. I think it really beefs them up. So I'm high passing on the board at 80. So I'm not using the high pass on the Waves. But once again, right around 8K, it's a sweet spot. Boosting 3, boosting at 4.4 for 6, boosting 6 decibels at 1K to get some throatiness on the snare drum. And then I'm boosting again to get some bottom end at 163. And so let me show you what that sounds like. Here's with and without the EQ, and then with the EQ again. Yeah, and I'm compressing about 6 decibels of gain reduction on the snare. Once again, not afraid of the compression. So that's the first snare. The second snare, I'm not triggering, and it sounds like this. I'm just using some EQ and some shimmer and thickness from this free plugin called Revival, and then I'm compressing the snot out of it. So I teach my people that we only turn that one up basically if it's, for an example, a part where maybe the drummer is doing like a no snares activated part, like on maybe the intro, like To Our God or something like that. And then also we do that when there's snare roll parts. So it doesn't sound great as like a snappy, punchy snare, but it sounds pretty good for snare rolls and cadences and that kind of thing. So that's something that we would adjust during the live mix. Our people are trained to know when certain parts are of the songs. The toms, we have a rack tom and a floor tom. I'm not doing anything with them on the board except a high pass filter at 70. So if you notice, we're high passing the drums quite a bit to leave room for the bass guitar. I've got a gate on, but it's not super active. And then for the floor tom, I've also got a gate on, and it's a lot more active. So the rack tom, let me open these both. Hang on. So the rack tom on the left over here, the gate is it's being used, but it's not opening and closing nearly as much as the floor tom. We are boosting 9 decibels at 6K for some attack on the tom, and then I am cutting 15 at 800. So where I boosted at 800 on the kick drum, I'm cutting all of that on the toms. So they work hand in hand together. The kick drum and the toms sometimes clash, and we don't want that to happen. Um, so at 75, I am boosting 6. So I'm cutting at 70 and then boosting at 75. So it's a pretty narrow boost there for 6K. And then I've got compression going on, probably around 4 decibels of gain reduction. So for the floor tom, it's pretty similar. I'm boosting at 10K to get the attack. I'm boosting at 4.5 to get a little bit more attack in a different spot. The 10K is more air. The 4.5 is more the stick hitting. At 800, I'm not cutting nearly as much, but I'm still cutting 7 decibels. And then at 150, I am boosting by almost 8 decibels in similar gain reduction. So let me find a part that has toms, and I will let you hear those. Cool. And I have the rack tom panned left and the floor tom panned right as if it were from the drummer's vantage point. For the overheads, we're using Audio Technica 4040s on the overheads in a Recorder Man setup. If you don't know what that is, Google it. There's a lot of good videos on YouTube explaining the Recorder Man. I really, really like this setup for overheads. Um, I am high passing all the way to 300. So I don't really want any kick drum in these. And then I'm boosting 7 decibels around 14K for some air. Another boost at 5.3K for some presence. Taking out some harshness around 1.5, and then I'm boosting at 348. And I really like the way that sounds. It adds some warmth and some meat without getting really involved with the kick drum and the bass guitar and the toms. So let me show you what those sound like. I'll bypass both of them first, and then we'll play them from there. Cool. Now I'm going to turn it on. Cool. And then let me go ahead and play all the drums from that same spot. And I'll do it without EQ and compression and then add that back in. Right. So even without, it doesn't sound bad. Let me add it back in and see if it's a little bit more punchy. Right. So definitely more punchy, a lot more in your face. That's what we want. For the bass guitar, man, I hate mixing bass guitar. Did I say that out loud? Okay, yeah, I did. So bass guitar is probably my least favorite thing in the entire world to mix. It is what it is. So I'm not very good at getting a good sound with traditional EQ and compression. But man, Chris Lord-Alge is a beast, and I use his signature series plugin on this bass guitar, and it sounds very, very good. So It's $29 for Waves. I think it's 29 right now. So it's a great plugin to have. Um, the bass is ran through this CLA bass, and I don't do anything to it. All that I do is mess with the input sensitivity, make sure it's at the right volume, and then leave everything as is, and it sounds good. On the board, though, I do some EQ, and I low cut the EQ. So on the board I do some EQ on the bass. I have a high pass filter around 50. I'm cutting at 200, and then I am also basically taking everything from 2K above completely out of it. I know that a lot of people don't like to do something like that. Um, they don't like to waste the top end of the bass and hear all those melodic parts, but honestly, our bass players don't play that many of them. And in the mix, I can get it to sit better if it's not up there competing with the electric guitars and the vocals. So the drum reverb is on this Effects 4 bus right here. And I'm using this room reverb that's built into the X32. And I think I just selected like drum room as a preset, and I'm using that. I have EQ'd some of the top end out of it with a shelf, took out 5K, boosted a little bit where the kick drum sits, and then cut um, from basically 100 down. Um, so it doesn't get muddy sounding. And I really like that reverb. I've got everything run through it, including the kick drum. The kick drum's just down a little bit compared to everything else. And we keep that roughly at negative 10 decibels on the fader. So there you have it. That is what we do with our drums. I really dig the way they sound, and I hope that that helps you. Not everything that we do is perfect. We don't know everything. Um, our staff here has put a lot of work into making our mix sound as good as we can. But if you guys have any ideas, please let us know in a comment or send us a message. We're always looking to improve as well. The next video, we're going to discuss guitars and the track, um, and then we're pretty much ready to go mix wise, and we'll look at an entire mix. So see you guys in the next video.